folks. Welcome to the day after Tampa Bay. And before we get started with all of the comments from yesterday on yesterday's video, quick procedural note. It looks like the Vikings won't be addressing the kicker situation today, and I think that there are signals out there that it's likely that Dan Bailey is going to be the guy still until the end of the season for various reasons. Number one being they don't have a plan B ready to go, and number two, it would probably take them missing a game or not having a kicker for a game in order to be able to roster a new one because of all of the COVID procedures and protocols that are now in place. 5 consecutive days with a negative test. So it's Monday. Nothing's happened. It's almost 5 p.m. I don't anticipate anything happen today. Mike Zimmer did interview with some media saying that he hasn't talked to Dan Bailey yet, and he would do that either today or tomorrow or Wednesday. So I think he's probably going to put it off until Wednesday if I know anything about him. The fact that he's not fired or the fact that he's not cut immediately, I think, is the biggest key or the biggest hint that he's going to be on this team for the rest of the season unless something even more egregious happens on Sunday, which I don't know how you get more egregious than what happened on Sunday. The guy literally couldn't do his job. So we'll revisit that, of course, in the weeks to come. But for right now, it looks like Dan Bailey is still employed by the Minnesota Vikings. All right, so let's get on to your comments and my reactions for the day after Tampa Bay. Heartbreaking loss really puts a railroad spike in the playoffs. And I think if we're being honest with ourselves, we need to stop thinking about playoffs, because imagine if what happened yesterday happens in January. Like, the meltdown among fans would be extraordinary. It would just be taken to levels that we haven't even experienced yet. Like, it's one thing to get absolutely crushed in the playoffs against the 49ers and the Eagles where you stand no chance, but to have a chance and to leave 10 points on the field, it would be a monumental disaster. Maybe that's what they need. Maybe that's something that needs to happen. Something it just has to be like the worst possible thing to happen in order to get change in this organization. All right, so the first comment comes from Cole Wagner. They say, when is ownership going to take responsibility for the product on the field? The coaching staff comes up short in the biggest games that matter the most. When's a change going to be implemented? When is enough for the Wilf family? Well, that's a great question. And I think that the answer to that is that this isn't enough. I think that they're going to use the second half, Zimmer and Spielman, as a way to save their jobs, to be like, hey, look, we came out of the weeds. I think they overachieved, but they won't admit that. We were able to do what we needed to do to make a run at the playoffs, and depending on what happens in these final 3 games, let's assume they fall short. They'll be like, well, look, we fell short. If we get Michael Pierce back, this will be their pitch, right? If we'll get Michael Pierce back, we'll get Anthony Barr back. We'll have another year with these rookies. We'll have another draft class come in. We'll be loaded and ready to go and get back to the playoffs. Odd number year. This is when it's our time. So I don't think we're going to see change at least until 2021. And I don't anticipate very much change happening because of all of the contracts that we find ourselves under, right? And it's a lot easier to get rid of Mike Zimmer and to get rid of Rick Spielman because those contracts don't count against the salary cap. That's just whether or not the Will family wants to write those checks. So that is all dependent on how much money they want to spend for no return, right? I think it would be foolish to go into next season and not switch to Eric Bieniemy and realize the writing on the wall is that the current formula is stuck in the mid-90s. Moving on to the next comments from Trevor Johnson. What about these horrible refs? They were very influential in the outcome of the game. Yeah, as I said yesterday, I will never be somebody that complains about officiating. You can watch every single video I've ever made on this channel, and it barely comes up except for yesterday. And yesterday was just some of the most egregious officiating I've ever seen in a Vikings game. I'm sure there's others, and I'm sure other people will bring other stuff up. But man, what a bunch of ridiculous missed calls and calls that shouldn't have been made. So my biggest complaint was, of course, the Hail Mary pass, which somebody pointed out that never gets called. Last time it was called pass interference on the defense for Hail Mary was 2009. That should never be, and it didn't even look that egregious on the field. I mean, give me a break. That's a gifted 3 points to Tampa Bay there at the end of the first half for a field goal try. The non-call on the forearm to the face mask of Cousins by Jason Pierre-Paul, that's egregious, because if that happens to Tom Brady, he is 100% getting that call. And it's it just goes to show you that it's, I don't want to say there's a conspiracy to elevate certain players, but certain players do get certain calls. Cam Newton would be an excellent case study for not getting the same calls as other quarterbacks, because he gets beat to hell in the pocket, and he just doesn't get the same calls that other players do. And then, of course, the other one is Harrison Smith, who seems to be a target by NFL officiating this season, because every time he goes to make a tackle, they are scrutinizing it to the highest degree, and they flag him more. I want to say more often than anybody else, because it just happens once or twice a game, and it's just getting annoying. So hopefully we don't have to deal with that anymore. Hopefully there's never a situation where it's that bad again. Next comment comes from Nude1717. New leadership with a new attitude is needed. This group doesn't have it. They can be good, but they will never be great. And I think this one really hits the nail on the head about things that I've been saying about leadership for a number of years, or not a number of years, but for a number of months. Number one, my complaint has always been with Kirk Cousins' attitude when it comes to being a leader, because he's just not that guy. Right? He gets a lot of those business comparisons. Corporate Kirk Cousins is a nickname that I've heard thrown around a lot, because he doesn't run down the field to celebrate with his teammates on touchdowns, right? He's not a Baker Mayfield who's going to go down there, do a spinner Rooney, and take pictures of what's his name walking down the runway after a big touchdown play. It's just, that's not his thing. And I really wish it was. I would rather have a Baker Mayfield mentality of somebody who runs down the field like an idiot, sprinting to celebrate with his teammates. That just does so much for morale and camaraderie, and it's just absent from him. He's just not a leader. It's just never been. And I even highlighted that earlier in the season after they lost to the Titans on that play to Justin Jefferson where he beats double coverage and scores a touchdown. He just trots over to the sideline, takes his helmet off, business as usual. So yeah, I wish he had more fire. I wish he was more. I know he's competitive internally. I wish he was competitive externally. Mike Zimmer is another guy when it comes to leadership, because it seems he's only focused on the defense. This is his third kicker in his Vikings tenure that is melted down, because I don't think that he gives two damns about developing or coaching anything but the defense. Right? He hires Gary Kubiak, who could probably be a head coach somewhere else. That's debatable, but he's basically running the offense. He brought in. That guy from the Eagles, I forget his name, Philip or something. I forget who it was. It's so out of my memory. That didn't work out. He's like, okay, I got to fire you. Elevates Kevin Stefanski. And then, he's like, hey, you run the offense. He basically tells them, this is what I want to do. I want to run the football. I don't care about the quarterback. I don't care about, these huge, vertical route go plays. I don't want to be an explosive offense. I want to be an offense that controls the ball and lets my defense rest. That's his philosophy. So, I think from that standpoint, his leadership lacks everywhere but the defense. And I think we could benefit from somebody that is more well-rounded. Next comment comes from Self-Help. The one bright spot I take away from all of this is that Jeff Gladney at least looked like he wasn't a bust. Yeah, I agree 100%. I was hesitant with Jeff Gladney at the beginning of the season because he didn't start right away, and that was very concerning. Then, of course, the Mike Hughes injury happens, and we never get Holton Hill back. So he was sort of forced into the starting role, and I think it's probably for the better, because the more reps you get at a position that is a lot harder to transfer, from college to professional level, is a lot, more beneficial to you. You'll develop faster. And the fact that, Mike Zimmer, as we just said, is more focused on the defense, so he's getting more of the coaching attention. And I think he's really turned a corner since the bye week. I'm not ready to crown him yet. I still think that he was, he's under, what would you call it? Underproduced for his draft position. I think, what was it? He was 25th, 26th overall pick in the first round last year. He hasn't produced to that spot yet. Justin Jefferson has beyond produced his spot, but Gladney, I think, is still underachieving. So he still has a while to go. And I really like Cam Dantzler too. If he can stay healthy, I think we have a pretty good quarterback tandem going into next year. Next comment comes from Samson. The playoff hopes are dead. Thanks, Dan. Yeah, 100%. And like I said, are we happier that this happened now as opposed to January, where we're, in a playoff game on the road against a team where we're, it's a close game and the defense is making good plays and the offense is doing well and Cousins is doing well, and it comes down to a kicker meltdown? Do we want to have that conversation now, or do we want to have it in January? I think it's better to have it now, right? We're getting it out of our system. Noah Koski says, as a diehard Vikings fan, this is just way too familiar. And that's the honest to God truth, because we have spent the last 24 hours revisiting all of the failures of, ghosts of kickers Vikings past, right? Kai Forbath, Daniel Carlson, Gary Anderson, Blair Walsh, probably the biggest, offender of the bunch. Who can forget that? If you're a Vikings fan, you absolutely remember where you were for that kick that went wide left, and the jokes and the memes that followed the day after. If I could say one thing, though, about the comparisons between past experiences and what we had yesterday, that at least Blair Walsh, from what I remember, at least owned up to it, right? He didn't come out, but, he answered media questions after the game, and, he basically said, this is on me. And I haven't heard a peep from from Dan Bailey, um, which is kind of, I don't want to say cowardly, but like, come on, you know that you were the critical part of that failure on Sunday. Why are you not addressing it? So I think that's interesting, a comparison between the two of them. Next, we have Riley Emmer, who says Vikings are even bad at being bad. For me, it's worse knowing that nothing will change next year. So 2 points to that. One, yes, it is funny how when we are bad, we are hold my beer, style bad. Like, this team over here is bad, but the Vikings are like, you haven't seen nothing yet. Check out what we're about to do. And which is hilarious at the same time as depressing, but it does seem, and that was sort of my emotion going into filming yesterday's video right at the beginning, where I was just like, boy, I'm so tired of losing in this dramatic fashion. Like, every loss has to have a superseding storyline or headline that isn't just, wow, we played hard, but it just wasn't enough. There's some things here we could have done differently. It's always something, right? The Titans game was a final drive collapse. The Falcons game was 3 first half interceptions, just an absolute meltdown by Cousins in the first half. The Cowboys game was just, not being able to play good defense. That was one of those losses where it's just like, hey, we sucked, but, there's not one thing that was very egregious. It was just egregious all around. And then you come to this game, and we went from talking about the playoffs to talking about what kickers are available that we can change to in a matter of 7 days. And that's just absolutely ridiculous. So yeah, when we lose, we're bad at being bad. It's just the funniest thing. For the second part of that comment, knowing that nothing will change next year, I feel you on this, because as I said before, I'm tired of 8-8. I'm tired of 10-6. I'm tired of 11-5 and losing in the first round of the playoffs. Because every time during Mike Zinier's tenure, when we get to the playoffs, we get punched in the mouth, we get blown out. Absolutely no chance outside of the first scripted drive to score points, and it's embarrassing. Why do we continue to buy into this mentality that better things aren't possible? And I don't know. I don't know what the answer is to that. I agree. I don't think things are going to change very dramatically next year. Any Vikings fan that is hoping for big time change, unless we have a complete meltdown in these last 3 games, I don't think that's happening. So I wouldn't hope for it. It's going to be the same stuff. I think we open next year with virtually the same roster, minus a few veterans that we can't afford. There's still the Danielle Hunter debate that needs to be had, and whether or not he's with the team next year. But it's going to look the same. We're going to run the ball 30 times a game next year. Kirk Cousins is going to have his good games and his bad games. And we probably go 10-6 because it's an odd number year and we get kicked out of the first or second round of the playoffs. It'll be, the storylines, the script basically writes itself. Final comment comes from Calinks. I don't really know how to pronounce it. Calinks. I wish we tanked this season. Need a high draft pick. Yes. I think we were all on board with that, 6 weeks ago when we were 1-5, before the bye week. Right now, we currently are picking 14th. If the if the season were to end today, we'd have the 14th overall pick. And this is concerning for a number of reasons. One, you are outside of the realm of getting a potential, stud. It's Justin Jefferson, where he was picked, doesn't always happen. That's not always a thing. Top 10, top 15 is where you find real difference makers in their first year. Good example would be Tristan Wirfs, who we just played against on Sunday for Tampa Bay. But here's the thing, though. If you currently look at the draft standings, the Bears and the Lions are ahead of us. And that's concerning because they're both probably looking at new quarterbacks very soon. And it would be criminal of both of those organizations to pass on the opportunity to do that this year with guys like Zach Wilson and Trey Lance, probably within striking distance for them. Trubisky's not likely coming back to Chicago. Matt Nagy's currently saving his job, but who knows who that's going to be at that head coaching spot next year. The Lions are in transition. They're probably going to lose Kenny Golladay to free agency. They don't have a general manager or a long-term head coach right now. And Matthew Stafford probably should be traded from that team while they still can get something for him. It would be unceremonious, but I think it might happen. So do we risk, letting two teams potentially draft franchise quarterbacks ahead of us this year while we're still lingering, on the merry-go-round of mediocrity? I don't know. That's risky. So, but that's all your comments. Thank you for providing those. It's always good to react to viewers and other Vikings fans and sort of give you my take. So that is our video for today. Tomorrow we'll talk more about Dan Bailey. We'll see if something happens. Thank you for watching. Have a good one.